The Apache expected purity and youth. What he got was a curvy woman who undid his control. He had lived all his life here, in this community where traditions mattered more than anything else. People respected him, or at least, they followed his words. He was disciplined, serious, and very particular about the way things should be done. From an early age, he had learned that control and order were important. They kept life predictable, safe, and respected. That belief shaped every decision he made, from the way he worked to the way he interacted with others. His reputation among the people was well known. The Apache man had a certain presence. When he walked into a room, people noticed. They could sense his confidence, his calm authority. He believed in strength, respect, and the importance of certain standards, especially when it came to women. In his mind, women should be pure, gentle, and obedient. That was the tradition he had grown up with, the tradition he had learned from his elders, and the tradition he believed in without question. That morning, like every other, he had a clear idea of what he expected. Life in his mind followed rules. Control was not just a preference, it was a necessity. As he prepared for the day, he imagined meeting someone who would fit into his life exactly as he had imagined. He thought of a young woman who was delicate, respectful, and modest. He thought about someone who would quietly follow his lead, someone who would complement his life without challenging it. Little did he know that life often has its own plans. Across town, there was a woman who was very different from the image he had in his mind. She was curvy, confident, and full of energy that was impossible to ignore. She walked with a sense of freedom and lightness that drew attention wherever she went. People often noticed her smile, the brightness in her eyes, and the way she moved as if the world was her stage. Unlike the Apache man, she had never cared much for strict rules or traditions. She believed in living fully, expressing herself freely, and being true to who she was. To her, life was meant to be enjoyed, not controlled. Their meeting was not planned. It was one of those moments that seemed ordinary at first, but would turn into something unforgettable. The town had a local gathering that day, a small event where families and friends came together to socialize. There was laughter in the air, the smell of food cooking, and the sound of children running around. The Apache man attended as part of his routine, observing everything carefully. He liked to see how people behaved, who followed rules and who did not. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, noting details that others missed. Then he saw her. She was standing near the edge of the gathering, laughing freely with a group of friends. The way she moved, the way she carried herself, it was unlike anything he had expected. She did not seem shy or careful. She was loud when she spoke, her gestures full of energy. Her confidence was so strong that it was almost impossible to ignore. The Apache man felt a flicker of something he could not name. At first, he thought it was annoyance. Who was this woman who seemed so different, so unrestrained? But as he continued to watch, there was something in her presence that unsettled him, something that made him curious despite himself. He approached her cautiously, as he always did when meeting someone new. His steps were careful, deliberate. He wanted to assert control, to set the tone for the interaction. In his mind, he would lead the conversation, guide her behavior, and make it clear what he expected. But as soon as he started speaking, he realized this would not be easy. "Hello," he said, trying to keep his voice calm and firm. She turned toward him, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Hi there, nice day, isn't it?" she replied, her voice warm and friendly. Her words were simple, but her tone carried a sense of ease and confidence that he found challenging. She did not bow her head or act timid. She met his gaze directly, smiling openly. It was as if she knew exactly who she was and had no intention of pretending otherwise. He introduced himself, careful to choose his words. "I am from around here. It is good to see people at this gathering." She laughed softly, not mocking, but with a lightness that made him feel slightly off balance. "I love coming here. It's always fun to see everyone and meet new people." Her energy was infectious. She spoke with a rhythm, a freedom that made it hard for him to stay rigid. He tried to maintain control of the conversation, steering it toward topics that would allow him to assert his authority. But every time he thought he had a handle on things, she would slip in a word or a question that threw him off. She asked about his life, his experiences, his thoughts, in ways that were unexpected and refreshing. She was not afraid to challenge him gently, not in anger but in curiosity. The Apache man had never met anyone like her before. He was used to compliance, to people following a predictable path. She did not follow that path. She was unpredictable, lively, and full of contradictions that fascinated him. For the first time, he realized that his usual approach, control, discipline, and authority, might not work on her. And strangely, he did not mind. The conversation continued for a while. They spoke about their lives, their hopes, and their experiences. She shared stories of her childhood, her passions, and her dreams. He listened, sometimes critically, but also with growing interest. She had a way of speaking that made her perspective clear, yet inviting. She was confident in who she was, yet not arrogant. She drew him out of his rigid mindset without even trying. Around them, the gathering went on. Families laughed, children played, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. But in that small space, there was a quiet tension, a spark between two people who could not have been more different. He, the disciplined man, and she, the free-spirited woman, were beginning a dance of discovery that neither fully understood yet. At one point, he realized that he was smiling, a real, unplanned smile. It caught him off guard. He had not smiled like that in years, not in the way he was doing now. She noticed, of course, and her own smile grew wider. "You seem different when you smile," she said softly, teasing but kind. Perhaps," he replied, his voice low. He did not know why he felt this way, why her presence made him feel lighter yet unsettled. As the day went on, they continued to talk and observe each other. He learned that she was not just lively and confident, but also intelligent and thoughtful. She had opinions, ideas, and a sense of humor that was sharp but never cruel. He found himself wanting to understand her more, to know what made her tick, even though it went against everything he thought he knew about women and relationships. By the end of the gathering, it was clear that something had shifted. The Apache man, who had walked in expecting control and compliance, found himself intrigued by a woman who refused to be controlled. He felt a strange mixture of admiration, curiosity, and challenge. She had undone his certainty, challenged his expectations, and without intending to, captured his attention completely. As they said goodbye, he realized he did not want the encounter to end. She laughed, waved, and walked away with the same confidence she had carried all day. He watched her go, thinking about the way she had made him feel, confused, excited, and strangely free. He had expected purity, youth, and simplicity. What he got instead was a curvy, vibrant woman who had changed the rules of the game without even trying. And in that moment, he knew life had just become far more interesting than he had ever imagined. After their first meeting at the gathering, the Apache man could not get the woman out of his mind. Her energy, her confidence, her laughter, everything about her lingered in his thoughts. He had expected someone quiet, reserved, someone who would follow his lead without question. Instead, he had met a woman who seemed to exist entirely on her own terms, someone who refused to fit into the box he had imagined. And yet, he felt drawn to her in a way that surprised him. He tried to maintain his usual calm and control in daily life, but thoughts of her kept creeping in. Even when he was working or attending to responsibilities, he would catch himself replaying their conversation, analyzing her words, her gestures, the way she looked at him. There was something about her that challenged him, not with anger but with life itself. Meanwhile, the woman went about her day as if nothing had changed. To her, the world was a place of curiosity and opportunity. Meeting the Apache man had been interesting, but she did not think much about it at first. She enjoyed life, enjoyed people, and enjoyed being herself. Yet, as the hours passed, she too found herself thinking about him. There was something different about the way he carried himself. His seriousness, his discipline, the quiet confidence that seemed unshakable. She felt an unusual pull toward him, a sense that behind his rigid exterior, there was more than he allowed people to see. It was only a few days later that their paths crossed again. The town had another small event, a market day where people gathered to sell, buy, and socialize. She was browsing through colorful stalls, laughing with friends as they examined handmade goods and local produce. He had come to the market for routine errands but noticed her immediately. She was standing near a stall of bright fabrics, turning each one over with curiosity. He approached her cautiously, just as before, but this time there was a subtle tension in the air. He wanted to speak with her, to continue what had begun, but he also felt the challenge that her personality represented. He could no longer imagine guiding the conversation fully, because she had already proven that she was her own person. "Hello again," he said, keeping his voice steady but careful. She turned, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Hi, I didn't expect to see you here," she said, smiling warmly. "I come here sometimes," he replied simply. "It is useful." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You make everything sound so serious." "This is fun, not just useful," she said, glancing at the colorful stalls around them. He frowned slightly, trying to maintain his composure. He was not used to people challenging his perspective so easily. Yet he found himself intrigued by her point of view. She saw the world differently, and he could not ignore it. As they walked through the market together, he noticed how she interacted with people. She was kind, attentive, and respectful, but she never lost her own sense of self. She laughed openly, asked questions boldly, and spoke with honesty. People seemed drawn to her, not because she tried to impress them, but because she radiated warmth and confidence. He could not help but compare her to the image he had held in his mind of the kind of woman he expected to meet. She was nothing like that. She was curvy, bold, lively, and independent. She did not conform to his expectations, and yet she captivated him. For the first time, he felt that life could not be controlled entirely. There were forces, people, and experiences that could break through even the strongest walls of habit and tradition. Their conversation began as small talk, but quickly moved into deeper subjects. She asked him about his life, his work, and his responsibilities. He answered carefully, trying to maintain the seriousness he was known for, but she listened attentively, never judging, never laughing at his answers. Her interest felt genuine, which made him relax slightly. He was used to people nodding politely or following rules, but she actually wanted to understand him. In turn, she shared more about her own life. She spoke of her passions, her dreams, and her love for freedom. She told him about the small joys she found in everyday life, the colors of fabrics at the market, the laughter of children, the warmth of a sunny morning. He listened, fascinated. Her words painted a world so different from his own structured life, yet it was a world he wanted to understand. As they walked together, small clashes of personality began to emerge. He would make a serious remark about discipline or responsibility, and she would respond with lightness, humor, or a question that made him pause. She never argued aggressively. She simply presented another way of seeing things. At first, he felt irritation because he was not used to being challenged. But gradually, he realized that her perspective was not threatening. It was refreshing, even enlightening. There were moments of silence too, moments where they simply observed the market and the people around them. During these times, he noticed small details about her, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the warmth in her smile, the confidence in her posture. He also noticed that she observed him closely, noticing his seriousness, his care for detail, and the subtle ways he interacted with others. It became clear that neither of them was entirely like the other. She was free-spirited and expressive, while he was disciplined and careful. Yet, there was a magnetic pull between them. Each saw something in the other that was intriguing and unfamiliar. He admired her independence, while she respected his integrity and sense of responsibility. By the end of the market day, the tension between them had grown in a new way. It was no longer just curiosity, it was recognition. They saw qualities in each other that were worth exploring, qualities that challenged their assumptions and broadened their understanding of life. However, not everyone in the town viewed their interactions positively. Some people whispered as they passed, noticing the unusual pairing. They did not understand how two people so different could even spend time together. The Apache man, who had long cared about appearances and respect, felt the pressure of these judgments. Yet, he also realized that he did not care as much as he had expected. The pull he felt toward this woman was stronger than the fear of gossip or judgment. She, too, felt the weight of attention but ignored it gracefully. She was not concerned with what others thought. What mattered to her was the connection, the understanding, and the honesty she felt in his presence. She had learned that life was too short to be controlled by the opinions of others. As the sun began to set, painting the town in shades of orange and gold, they found themselves walking side by side, sharing laughter and stories. It was a quiet, intimate moment, though nothing had yet been spoken about feelings or intentions. Yet, in that shared silence, they both sensed that something important was beginning. The Apache man, who had walked into their first meeting expecting simplicity and obedience, realized that he had been challenged in a way he had never imagined. She had shown him that life could not always be planned or controlled, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from embracing the unexpected. For her, the experience had been equally surprising. She had met a man who was disciplined, serious, and traditional, yet beneath that exterior was someone who could be curious, thoughtful, and even gentle. She saw the potential for growth, understanding, and shared experiences that could enrich both of their lives. By the time they parted that evening, both felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Neither knew exactly where this connection would lead, but they knew that their meeting had already changed them. The Apache man had begun to question the limits of control and expectation, while the woman had discovered a depth and seriousness in him that was unexpected. As they walked away from each other, both carried a sense of excitement and curiosity. Life, they realized, was unpredictable. People were unpredictable. And sometimes, the most powerful experiences come from encountering someone who does not fit the mold you have carefully constructed. In the days that followed, they would continue to meet, continue to challenge each other, and continue to learn. Their worlds, so different, so contrasting, were beginning to intertwine in ways neither could have imagined. And in that intertwining, both were on the verge of discovering that connection, understanding, and even love often grow in the spaces where control and expectation are released. The clash of worlds had begun, and with it, a journey of discovery, growth, and unexpected bonds that neither would ever forget. Days turned into weeks, and the Apache man found himself thinking about the curvy, confident woman more and more. At first, he had believed that their encounters were simple coincidences, brief interruptions in the routine of his life. But now, he realized that she had begun to occupy a space in his mind that he could not ignore. Her energy, her laughter, her independent spirit, it had all left a mark on him, subtle but unmistakable. For someone who had always valued control and predictability, this was new and somewhat unsettling. The woman, on her part, had begun to notice a change in herself as well. Initially, she had found the Apache man serious, strict, and perhaps even intimidating. But over time, she saw that beneath his disciplined exterior was someone capable of kindness, thoughtfulness, and reflection. There were moments when he let down his guard, brief glimpses of vulnerability that made her smile. She had learned that he was not a man easily swayed, not one who followed whim or impulse, but she also recognized that he was capable of growth and adaptation if given the right encouragement. Their paths crossed again one afternoon at the town's small library. She was there looking for books about art and culture, while he had come to study local history. He noticed her immediately, as though some invisible thread drew his attention toward her. She was flipping through a book, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration, unaware that he had entered the same space. He approached cautiously, his steps measured, his expression calm but curious. "You seem to enjoy learning," he remarked, his voice breaking the silence of the library. She looked up, her eyes lighting up as they met his. "I do. I think books are windows to the world," she said softly, a thoughtful smile on her face. He nodded, impressed by the simplicity and clarity of her words. He had expected her to be lively and bold, but she also had a depth that he had not anticipated. This depth intrigued him even more than her confidence or energy. It was one thing to be bold and unafraid. It was another to combine that courage with insight and curiosity. They walked together through the aisles of the library, discussing books, stories, and the ideas that had shaped their thoughts. For the Apache man, this was unusual. He was not used to conversations that wandered freely, that explored ideas rather than focusing solely on responsibilities or duties. Yet, he found himself enjoying the exchange. He listened intently as she spoke, asking questions that challenged his thinking in ways that were gentle but powerful. She, too, was fascinated by him. His discipline, his dedication, and his careful consideration of ideas were qualities she admired. Unlike others who might have dismissed his seriousness as rigidity, she saw value in his approach. She began to understand that his control was not a flaw, but a part of who he was, a framework he relied on to navigate the complexities of life. Yet she also realized that her presence had begun to challenge him, to loosen the tight hold he had on every situation. Over time, their conversations became more frequent. They would meet in quiet spaces, sometimes at the library, sometimes in small parks or along shaded streets. With each meeting, they learned more about each other, uncovering layers of personality, past experiences, and hidden fears. The Apache man discovered that she had faced challenges in her life that required resilience and courage. She had learned to rely on herself, to embrace her individuality, and to navigate the world with confidence. He, in turn, shared parts of his own life that he rarely revealed. He spoke of the responsibilities he had grown up with, the expectations that had been placed upon him, and the strict codes of conduct that shaped his decisions. He spoke not with pride, but with a quiet honesty that impressed her. She could see that beneath his control was a man who cared deeply, who was capable of reflection, and who had the potential for change if approached with patience and understanding. As they spent more time together, subtle shifts began to occur. The Apache man, who had once believed that control was the key to respect, began to question his assumptions. He noticed that when he allowed her freedom, when he listened without trying to guide or correct, their interactions became richer, more meaningful, and even joyful. He began to realize that respect and trust were stronger than control, and that genuine connection required a willingness to release rigid expectations. The woman, too, noticed changes in herself. She had always valued independence, but she found herself enjoying his presence in ways she had not expected. There was a sense of safety, of stability in his seriousness, and yet there was also a softness that emerged when he trusted her and allowed himself to be vulnerable. She began to see that their differences were not barriers, but opportunities for growth, understanding, and shared experiences. One afternoon, as they walked along a quiet street lined with trees, the conversation turned to personal dreams and fears. She spoke of the future she envisioned for herself, the places she wanted to see, and the experiences she hoped to embrace. He listened, reflecting carefully on her words, and then shared his own aspirations, his desire for meaningful work, for a life of integrity, and for connections that went beyond appearances and expectations. In that moment, they both realized that they were influencing each other in ways neither had anticipated. She was teaching him the value of flexibility, the joy of spontaneity, and the richness of embracing life fully. He was teaching her the importance of patience, thoughtfulness, and the quiet strength that comes from discipline. Together, they were learning that balance could be found between freedom and structure, between independence and shared understanding. Despite the growing bond between them, there were moments of tension. The Apache man's expectations sometimes clashed with her free spirit. He would occasionally struggle with the unpredictability of her actions, while she would feel constrained by his seriousness. These moments were never harsh or disrespectful, but they were real and challenging. They required communication, compromise, and empathy. And through these challenges, their connection deepened because they were not avoiding difficulties. They were facing them together. The community continued to watch them with curiosity. Some people whispered, some expressed doubt, but the pair paid little attention. They had discovered something that mattered more than approval or opinion. They had discovered the beginnings of a bond built on mutual respect, curiosity, and growing admiration. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they sat together on a bench overlooking a quiet river. The water reflected the colors of the sky, calm and steady, just like the feelings that had begun to grow between them. The Apache man looked at her and realized that he no longer wanted to control her. He wanted to understand her, support her, and be part of her world, not by guiding it, but by walking alongside her. She, in turn, recognized that he was capable of love and care that went beyond appearances or tradition. She saw that his willingness to change, to embrace the unexpected, was a sign of strength rather than weakness. In that shared silence, both felt a quiet but powerful shift, a recognition that their bond was no longer just about curiosity or fascination. It was about connection, trust, and the beginnings of something deeper. By the end of Part 3, their relationship had moved beyond first impressions and curiosity. They were beginning to influence each other's lives in profound ways, learning about balance, respect, and the beauty of embracing differences. The Apache man had started to loosen his grip on control, while the woman had begun to appreciate the quiet strength behind his seriousness. Together, they were forming a bond that promised growth, understanding, and the possibility of something lasting. And though neither could see the full path ahead, both knew that their lives had been changed forever by this unexpected connection. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between the Apache man and the confident, curvy woman grew stronger. Their connection had moved beyond casual curiosity and shared conversation. It had begun to touch something deeper in both of them, a recognition that life could be richer when shared, and that understanding and respect mattered more than rigid expectations. Yet with growth came challenges. The Apache man was beginning to feel something he had never allowed himself to feel before: vulnerability. He had spent his entire life in control, carefully managing his actions, emotions, and relationships. Control had been his way of feeling safe, of making sense of the world, and of ensuring respect. He was accustomed to being the leader in every situation, the one who decided the pace, the rules, and the boundaries. And now, the woman he had grown to admire was gently, unknowingly, challenging every part of that worldview. She had a way of encouraging him to be more open without forcing the issue. Her laughter, her stories, and her curiosity were constant reminders that life could not be neatly ordered. She had her own ideas, desires, and rhythms, and she did not bend to his will. She would offer suggestions, propose small adventures, or simply ask him questions that made him think. Sometimes, these moments left him frustrated because he was used to knowing the answer, being in control, and ensuring that things went as planned. Other times, they left him fascinated because her ideas were fresh, lively, and full of possibility. One afternoon, they found themselves walking along a quiet path near the edge of the town. The air was crisp, and the sound of leaves rustling in the wind filled the space between them. The woman suggested they take a small detour to explore a hidden grove she had discovered as a child. Normally, he would have preferred to stick to the main path, to maintain order and predictability. But something in her tone, her gentle insistence, encouraged him to follow. As they stepped into the grove, he felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The path was uneven, the trees closed together, and the sunlight flickered in unpredictable patterns. For someone so accustomed to control, it was a small test, a test of patience, trust, and adaptability. He noticed how effortlessly she moved through the space, laughing when she stumbled slightly and encouraging him to do the same. "This is beautiful," she said, her eyes sparkling as she looked around. "I used to come here when I needed to think. It always makes me feel free." He nodded, taking in the surroundings. It was indeed beautiful, but more importantly, it was unfamiliar, uncontrolled, and unpredictable, exactly the kind of situation that challenged him. And yet, for the first time, he felt excitement rather than anxiety. They walked further into the grove, sharing stories from their past. She spoke of moments when she had faced challenges, times when she had been underestimated, and how she had learned to rely on her own strength. He listened carefully, reflecting on his own experiences and realizing that he had often been too rigid, too focused on control to truly see life as it was. "Do you ever feel like you're holding yourself back?" she asked gently, looking at him with sincere curiosity. He paused, considering her question. It was not one he had been asked before. "Perhaps," he admitted quietly. I have always relied on rules, order, and control. It has been my way of living." She nodded, understanding but not judging. "Sometimes," she said, "letting go of control can teach us more than holding on ever could. You don't lose strength by trusting, you gain freedom." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that his desire to control every situation had limited him in ways he had not understood. He had been strong, yes, but perhaps not fully alive. Her presence, her influence was slowly showing him a different way, a way where strength and freedom could coexist. Over the next few weeks, these lessons continued in small ways. She would encourage him to try new foods, explore unfamiliar places, or meet people he might otherwise have avoided. Each time, he felt a mixture of hesitation and thrill. There were moments when he wanted to retreat, to return to the comfort of control. But there were also moments when he felt alive in ways he had never known. She had become a guide, not by forcing him, but by simply living her life with confidence, joy, and authenticity. One evening, a minor crisis occurred that tested their bond. A small fire broke out in a nearby area of the town, and the Apache man rushed to help, as he often did during emergencies. She arrived shortly after, determined to assist in any way she could. They worked together, coordinating with others to ensure safety and prevent damage. In the chaos, he realized something important. He could not control everything, and that was okay. Her calm, practical assistance reminded him that he did not need to shoulder responsibility alone. After the crisis was resolved, they walked together in silence, exhausted but relieved. He looked at her and saw not only bravery but wisdom, kindness, and strength. He felt gratitude and admiration that went beyond words. It was clear that she had reshaped his understanding of strength, not as control, but as the courage to trust, to adapt, and to embrace life fully. Their relationship continued to deepen in subtle ways. He began to notice how much her confidence inspired him. When she spoke freely, laughed openly, or faced challenges with courage, he felt a desire to match her authenticity. He started to let go of small habits of control, realizing that life could be richer when shared, when experienced fully, and when approached with openness. She noticed these changes too. She saw that he was listening more, laughing more, and taking risks he would have avoided before. It was a slow, delicate transformation, but it was real. He had begun to trust her, not just as a companion, but as someone who could influence his life in meaningful ways. There were still moments of tension, of course. Sometimes, he would revert to old habits of control, insisting on order or predictability. And sometimes she would push back, reminding him gently that life did not always follow rules. These moments were never destructive. Instead, they were opportunities for growth. Each disagreement, each challenge, strengthened their connection because it required understanding, patience, and empathy. By the end of this period, it was clear that both had changed. He was no longer the man entirely ruled by control. He had begun to embrace flexibility, spontaneity, and the unpredictability of life. She had learned to appreciate structure and discipline, seeing how it could support her freedom rather than limit it. Together, they were discovering a balance, a way of living that honored both individuality and shared connection. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together by a quiet riverbank. The water reflected the colors of the sky, calm and steady, mirroring the new understanding they had found in each other. He looked at her and realized that he had begun to let go of the need to control, to manage, to dictate. He wanted to walk beside her, to share life fully without insisting on shaping it entirely according to his will. She smiled at him, sensing the shift. "You're different," she said softly. "I can see it. You're opening yourself to life in a new way." He nodded, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. "You have shown me that strength is not only in control," he admitted. "It is also in trust, in letting life unfold." She reached out, taking his hand gently. "And you've shown me that strength can also be quiet, steady, and careful. We're learning from each other." In that simple, shared moment, both felt a profound sense of connection. Their bond had moved beyond fascination or curiosity. It was now a relationship built on mutual growth, respect, and understanding. They had faced challenges, small and large, and had emerged stronger and more united. The Apache man realized that this transformation was just the beginning. Life would continue to test him, to present situations where his old habits might resurface. But now, he had a partner who could challenge him gently, who could inspire him to grow, and who could stand beside him as he navigated the complexities of life. The woman, too, felt the power of their connection. She saw that he was capable of change, of embracing freedom alongside discipline, and that their relationship could be a source of strength for both of them. She knew that they were building something rare, a bond based on understanding, respect, and the willingness to grow together. As night fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, they remained by the riverbank, talking softly, sharing dreams, and enjoying the quiet comfort of each other's presence. It was clear that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and tests of patience. But they had learned that together, they could face anything. By the end of Part 4, the Apache man had begun to truly confront his need for control. He had started to embrace flexibility, trust, and the unpredictability of life. The woman had helped him see that strength and love were not about domination or obedience, but about understanding, respect, and shared experience. Together, they had begun a transformation that would shape the rest of their lives. As the months passed, the bond between the Apache man and the curvy, confident woman grew stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. What had started as curiosity, fascination, and subtle challenge had now transformed into a connection that neither of them could ignore. Their differences, once obstacles, had become sources of growth, learning, and appreciation. The Apache man had learned to loosen his grip on control, to trust life, and to embrace spontaneity. She had learned that structure, patience, and steady care could enhance freedom rather than limit it. Together, they had created a partnership based on balance, respect, and genuine understanding. The town had long observed their relationship with curiosity. Some had doubted it at first, unable to understand how two people so different could connect. Others had whispered about the unlikely pairing, wondering whether their bond would last. But as time went on, the townspeople began to notice the change, not only in the Apache man and the woman individually, but also in the way they interacted with each other. There was harmony in their differences, a quiet power in their understanding, and a joy in their shared presence that was impossible to ignore. One sunny afternoon, they decided to take a long walk through the outskirts of town, a place where fields stretched wide and the horizon seemed endless. The woman skipped ahead occasionally, laughing at the way the wind carried her hair. The Apache man walked more slowly, watching her with admiration and a newfound sense of ease. He had learned to enjoy these moments without trying to control them, simply allowing life to unfold. "You've changed," she said suddenly, turning toward him with a playful smile. "You don't try to control everything anymore." He laughed softly, a sound that surprised even him. "Perhaps I've learned that some things are better when they are allowed to happen naturally," he replied, looking at her with sincere eyes. "You've taught me that." She reached out and gently touched his arm. "And you've taught me that patience and care can be beautiful. Life doesn't always have to be chaotic to be meaningful." Their hands met, fingers intertwining naturally. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything they had experienced together. The lessons learned, the challenges faced, and the respect they had built. They had grown individually and together, discovering that love and connection were not about control or compliance, but about understanding, trust, and support. As they walked, they reminisced about the early days of their encounters, the first market day, the library visit, the small detours through the town. They laughed at the awkward moments, remembered the small tensions, and marveled at how far they had come. It was clear that each moment had contributed to the bond they now shared. Each challenge had strengthened their connection, and each lesson had brought them closer to understanding one another fully. Later that evening, they returned to a quiet spot by the river, the place where so many of their meaningful conversations had taken place. The water shimmered under the soft light of the setting sun, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature. They sat side by side, their hands still entwined, and allowed themselves to simply be present with each other. "I never expected this," the Apache man said quietly, breaking the peaceful silence. "I thought I knew what I wanted, what I expected. And then I met you and everything changed." She smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "And I never expected someone like you," she said. "I thought life was only about freedom, about doing what I wanted. But you've shown me the beauty in balance, in patience, in thinking before acting. I've learned from you too." In that moment, there was no need for grand gestures or dramatic words. Their connection was quiet, profound, and complete. They had both grown, changed, and embraced the lessons of life and love together. The Apache man, who had once believed that control was the key to respect, now understood that true respect came from trust, empathy, and shared understanding. The woman, who had always valued independence, had discovered that freedom could coexist with care, responsibility, and thoughtful guidance. The days that followed were filled with shared experiences that further strengthened their bond. They explored new parts of the town, tried new activities together, and even engaged with the community in ways that had once seemed foreign to the Apache man. They helped organize small events, assisted neighbors, and supported each other in both small and significant ways. Their relationship became an example to others in the town, not of conformity, but of harmony, understanding, and mutual respect. One day, as they sat under the shade of a large tree, the Apache man spoke with quiet determination. "I want you to know that I accept you fully," he said. "Not because I have changed my expectations, but because I have learned to see the strength, beauty, and wisdom in who you are. You are not what I expected, and that is exactly why I value you." She looked at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. "And I accept you too," she said softly. "Not because you fit into my world perfectly, but because you are willing to grow, to change, and to walk with me as an equal. I respect and admire you for that." That evening they walked home together, side by side, their steps in harmony. The town streets were quiet, the sky painted in deep shades of blue and purple, and the air was calm. For the first time, both felt a sense of completion. Not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a life shared with understanding, respect, and love. As time went on, their relationship became stronger and more resilient. They faced challenges, as all couples do, but their foundation of trust, growth, and mutual respect allowed them to navigate difficulties with patience and care. They learned to communicate openly, to compromise without losing themselves, and to celebrate each other's strengths and individuality. The Apache man had truly let go of the need for absolute control. He had learned that life was richer when shared, when unpredictability was embraced, and when love was built on respect rather than expectation. The woman had discovered that her independence could coexist with partnership, and that true freedom included supporting and being supported in return. Their bond became a source of inspiration to the people around them. Friends and neighbors saw the harmony in their differences, the joy in their shared experiences, and the strength in their mutual respect. They realized that relationships did not require conformity or sacrifice of self, but thrived when individuality was honored and nurtured. One afternoon, as they sat on a hill overlooking the town, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the Apache man reflected on the journey they had shared. "I never imagined that life could be this full," he said quietly. "You've shown me so much, not only about love but about living." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you've shown me that strength and care can go hand in hand. We've both learned from each other, and that is what makes this so special." In that moment, both understood that their journey was ongoing. Life would continue to present challenges, surprises, and moments of uncertainty, but they also knew that together, they could face anything. Their bond was not fragile. It was built on the lessons of patience, trust, growth, and understanding. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, they remained together, talking softly, sharing dreams, and simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Their love was quiet, profound, and enduring, a love built on the acceptance of differences, the willingness to grow, and the courage to embrace life fully. The Apache man had expected purity, youth, and obedience. What he had found was something far greater, a woman who was confident, vibrant, and independent. She had undone his rigid control, but in doing so, she had also taught him the true meaning of connection, respect, and love. And together, they had built a life where differences were celebrated, individuality was honored, and love flourished in its most authentic form. As they walked back down the hill, hand in hand, both felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been unexpected, challenging, and transformative. But it had also been beautiful, full of growth, learning, and the joy of discovering that love was not about control or expectation, but about acceptance, understanding, and shared life. And so, their story continued, not as a tale of predictability or rigid tradition, but as a living testament to the power of authenticity, trust, and the magic that can happen when two people embrace each other fully, without trying to change what makes them unique. They had found something rare and extraordinary, a bond that would endure, grow, and thrive because it was built not on rules or expectations, but on respect, love, and the courage to embrace life together.